Moat on the volley, and the corner. What a start for West Bromwich Albion. Unbelievable! West Bromwich Albion have ruined his big day.
Line again, and it's Adam Wingy who gets the final touch, and West Bromwich Albion now have a 2-goal cushion.
The Baggies Podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Hello and welcome back to the Baggies Podcast, where of course giving you all the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Back again with another podcast, a special episode really, a bit of a different one for you, because we're going to be taking a little bit of a look at the championship season so far, obviously in the international break now, so we've got no championship action at the moment for Albion. But today, to take a look through the EFL Championship so far, I'm joined by an EFL expert. It's Gabriel Sutton. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Louis. Great to chat to you. I think it was great to have you on my show sort of around August, just before the Bournemouth game, wasn't it? And glad I can return the compliment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fantastic to have you on. But before we get into it, be sure to subscribe to the Baggies Podcast on your podcast provider. Make sure you drop us a nice little review if you've enjoyed the episode as well. But yeah, Gav, if we start by just asking you a little bit about what sort of work you do within the EFL community. Obviously, you don't just cover the Championship, you cover League One, League Two as well. What sort of stuff do you do and where can we find it?
Sure, I do a variety of things really, Louis. It's partly it's writing for various websites, partly it's obviously having that presence on social media. You can follow me on Twitter at Gabriel Sutton, and you can also follow the hashtag EFL debate, where I talk to fans of various different clubs across the EFL, and try and give the divisions the attention that it deserves. Obviously, there's some great people who cover those leagues, like the NTT20 podcast and the D3D4 football on League One and Two. But it's nice to kind of play my part in giving these leagues a bit of coverage.
Absolutely, yeah, they're all of these EFL leagues are just very undercovered by I think a lot of mainstream media companies. Obviously, there's a lot that do a great job of covering them, but you feel that the excitement of those leagues is just as big as perhaps the Premier League, which isn't to be mentioned on this podcast for hopefully until not yet, hopefully anyway. But Gav, firstly, if we start by talking a bit about West Brom, if we start by talking a little bit about the appointment of Valérien Ismaël, obviously that happened relatively early on in the summer, just before the window opened. What did you make of that appointment when you saw him, obviously having seen him at Barnsley over the last season before that?
Well, obviously, I'd been really impressed with the work that he did at Barnsley. I think the one thing that he probably benefited from a little bit at Oakwell is the fact that the team he'd taken charge of had been building towards his playing identity for 2 or 3 years. And this was constructing a young squad that presses high up the pitch and plays fairly direct, gets the ball forward early. I think that what really made me feel really curious about his time at West Brom, and what makes me even impressed about how well West Brom have started, currently sitting second in the Championship, is that he has been able to get his methods across early on. The high press has been there. West Brom have been able to carry that threat from set pieces and long throws, and the way that it's clicked has certainly impressed me. And because it was obviously, you'd look at the fact he was able to sign Alex Moat, who was his captain at Barnsley and a very important player in that Barnsley side that reached the playoffs. But I think it's going to be interesting to see, how West Brom's squad depth copes, because there's that possibility where some of the players in reserve are going to be quite old. Are they going to have that ability to fit into the high pressing game? But then, having said that, I looked at the bench from the game at Stoke City, and you look at somebody like Grady Diangana, who's very athletic. You've got Jason Malumbi, who at Millwall had that reputation for being very tenacious. Matthew Clark, I think, is a fantastic Championship centre-back, and you had him on the bench. So it's certainly come together so far.
Yeah, it definitely has, I think. I think there's been a few rocky performances, but if we talk a little bit, you mentioned the signing of Alex Mowat there, and obviously the additions of Malumbi and Matt Clark, who I think are all very solid additions, definitely at championship level. What did you make of the recruitment? Because obviously I saw on Twitter, you, like a lot of Albion fans, when we signed, I think it was Jordan Hugill, were going, no, we don't want this, and you were quite an advocate for him in particular. What have you seen from our recruitment, and particularly Jordan Hugill, that's made you think, oh, that's pretty decent?
I'm a huge fan of Jordan Hugill, Louis. I believe that he's one of the most underrated championship strikers of our era. That's one of my strong beliefs, because I remember watching him a couple of years ago now playing for Middlesbrough under a Tony Pulis side, and as your Albion fans will know, having seen Salomon Rondon sort of having been this brilliant international goal scorer and finding it really difficult to get any sort of chances in a Pulis side. That's how difficult it is. And what I loved about Jordan Hugill that day was his work rate was incredible. Like, you'd get to the 70th, 80th minute and he'd still be pressing the opposition goalkeeper. And I think that's partly what appealed to Valérien Ismaël. I think last season he was a little bit unlucky at Norwich in the sense that he was behind Timo Pukki. Daniel Farke was never going to be one to play two up top. And he certainly gave them another dimension, posing that threat from crosses. I think there was a game against Bristol City where he got a couple of goals in Pukki's absence. So I think this is a good championship striker. Maybe he's taken a little bit of time to show what he can do, but I believe he'll come good, and I think he is a great signing for what West Brom need.
Yeah, Jordan Hugill, for me, from what I've seen from him, I think he's only started 2 games, possibly 3 games for us, so he's not really had that massive chance at the moment. He's come off the bench a few times, and especially against Millwall, I think his work rate, I think that might have been his debut, but he showed that work rate that you talked about, and I think he looked really, really good in that particular game. I think his quality perhaps on the ball has lacked a little bit in the recent games that we've seen, but certainly for work rate, if he's working hard and he's not perhaps putting in the quality finishes that you want to see from him, I can deal with that, because if he's trying his best, that's all we can really ask from a player, really, I suppose. But
and just to, if you don't mind me sort of just exploring this point, I know you're the interviewer here, but I'm really curious to kind of get a sense of how you think Hugill coming in sort of helps West Brom's style of play, because certainly at the beginning of the season there was a feeling that you're a very direct side. You didn't really have that obvious presence. Do you think Hugill can sort of be that?
Yeah, I definitely think he can. I think it was he provides a very nice alternative to Kenneth Sahor, who I'm not sure if you've seen the not abuse, but the pretty harsh criticisms that he gets from Albion fans for being quite sluggish, I'm going to say lazy, a couple of yards behind it quite a lot of the time. So I think
had a tough time with injuries as well, I think, Sahor.
Yeah, definitely. He's been in and out of the side. He's never really got going in an Albion shirt, and I think Hugill's being brought in to just step in front of Sahor in our sort of pecking order as a striker, and just provide that target man presence up front. And I think he can be that. And he's certainly shown that he can hold the ball up well. He's happy to put his foot in. He's happy to get knocks, and he's happy to be battered all over the pitch. And that for me is a very good building block to start from. I'm sure Val can definitely get the best out of him in that position. For certain. So, Gab, if obviously you do your predictions in your article that you write about, all the EFL teams and where you think they're going to finish. Obviously, your prediction with West Brom, I'll say again, kicked up a little bit of a fuss. Would you mind just talking us a little bit into where you predicted West Brom to finish at, and why you predicted us to finish there?
I predicted West Brom to finish 13th, and I'm quite happy to say now that was a terrible prediction. And I appreciate you giving me a couple of questions first, kind of ease my way into it before you hit me with the batsman question. Sort of gradually sort of lulled me into a false sense of security. I think I was just really concerned that Valérien Ismaël would sort of encourage this really high pressing game. With at the time that I wrote this preview, I believe it was Dara O'Shea that was the only West Brom player that was under the age of 25 or 24 or something along those lines. And other than that, you're looking at youth team players that hadn't kicked the ball competitively. And I was a little bit worried about that because I felt like Valerian Ismail might be faced with choices in certain positions. Do I go with someone that will fit my style in terms of the energy levels required, but might be very raw? Or do I go with someone that's going to have more technical quality, but isn't going to be able to fit the style? So I was a little bit worried that West Brom would sort of be this side that tries to press high, but then get sort of cut open with balls through and then not having the legs to kind of get back. So that was my thinking at the time. Having said that, I do think that you've recruited well since then, and maybe the squad's starting to look a little bit better than perhaps I'd anticipated.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I can get that because when we played when we started this season, I thought we don't have the bulk in the squad to play the long ball. It was less about the high press, and I've always seen energy in the players that we started the season with. It was all about the long ball. But then I thought if we don't have that striker or these bigger front men to play up to, I don't think there's much in the middle of the park that spells quality on the ball if we have to play a shorter passing game. Obviously, Alex Mowat obviously has come to be a player that we've seen with quality on the ball, but Livermore alongside him, if you've only got one player who's got that quality on the ball, it does start to concern me a little bit. But I think it's worked a little bit better in previous games recently. I don't know what you made of that, whether you thought that the long ball would work with Albion with going into the start of the season with a front three of, I think it was Dean Garner, Grant and Robinson, who are all pretty small in their own right.
Yeah, well, what I noticed with West Brom in the first month of the season was that there were sort of two methods of chance creation, or maybe three at a push. One of them was obviously quick transitions, which with Carlin Grant and Callum Robinson, and even Alex Mowat, I think is quite an effective transitional player. That was one way of doing it. The other one would probably be the long throws, which were very effective against Sheffield United. And you've got when you're able to get some physical centre backs into the box, and certainly that was effective. But then I think in terms of the long ball, it felt like you were almost hoping that the opposition would sort of misplace a clearance from a long ball, and then you'd be able to pick up second balls,
Yeah.
rather than actually having a big striker and then getting a Robinson or getting a Grant into those dangerous areas. I suppose what you'll be hoping with Hugo is that he's got a very big, I think he's 6'1", which isn't that tall for a target man, but he's got a really big spring on him. So I suppose you'd be hoping that you can be effective from those long balls with someone like Hugo up there.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely the case, and very good analysis there about the drop in second balls. It's almost a little bit hopeful in a way, I guess, but it has worked several times, and the long throws, as you said, were so effective against Sheffield United. It was every time we had a long throw, you thought we were going to score, and I think often from those long throws we did. But yeah, definitely the case with those. So Gab, which sort of West Brom players have impressed you so far in this season?
That's a really good question. I've been really impressed with Callum Robinson and Carlin Grant, really. I think that they two really good championship players. Obviously, Callum Robinson had patches of good form last season in the Premier League. You think of that 5-2 at Chelsea would certainly be one of them. So I think Callum Robinson and Carlin Grant. And obviously, I think there's probably another gear for somebody like a Dean Garner to go up.
Yeah.
And Donald Furlong as well with those long throws has been pretty impressive. And I like Alex Mowat because he's tenacious, but he's also got a lovely left foot. And whenever he picks the ball up, he's always looking to drive forward and can I elude a challenge and then slot a ball through for a Robinson or a Grant? So I think Grant, Robinson, Mowat and Furlong will probably be the ones that caught my eye.
Perfect. Yeah, very good. I think my personal one is, I know he's been injured, but Matt Clark is a player that I've been really impressed by. I was not expecting too much from him. I was expecting a bit of a defender with a bit of a long ball on him, really, and not very good ball playing abilities. But I think he's one that, for me, I've seen that can actually play the ball along the floor out of the Albion back line, and is one of those that can create those, as you said, quick transitions when we're coming out from defence, and he can pick that pass that gets us up the pitch. Obviously, I hope to see him back against your side, actually, Gab, Birmingham on next Friday night.
Because he's left-footed as well, isn't he? And I think I don't think you've got an abundance of left-footed centre backs. And if you're playing with a back, it tends to be helpful to have the left-sided centre back being left-footed. And I've rated Matt Clark at this level for a long time. I think he deserves his opportunity in the Premier League, to be honest.
Yeah, I was really surprised actually to see him come back down to the Championship. I thought he's done really well at Derby, helped them survive. I thought he's going to go and play for Brighton this season, even if it is being third or fourth choice centre back. I thought he'll play, but no, that wasn't to be. But Gab, if we move on a little bit now to talk more about the Championship as a wider league. Obviously, there's 23 other teams to talk about, but we won't go into all of them. But before the Championship started, Gab, who did you tip for sort of promotion and relegation in your predictions? Who did you have nailed down in those spots?
So one of my strong beliefs was and still is up to a point that Fulham were going to win the title. And I felt in the summer that Fulham were going to run away with the league. I still think they could, but I'm probably not quite as convinced it's going to be a procession, I suppose, now, because they've all on at Coventry, and there's been maybe question marks over their spine. I still think that they will win the league, but it's going to need to be. I think they're probably going to improve in the second half of the season once they add a couple of players in January who've got a bit of physicality and a bit of leadership, just to give them that bit of balance. I didn't actually expect that Bournemouth to be quite as strong as they have been. I think I had them about third or fourth. And I actually had Barnsley doing very well because I thought that they'd be able to continue that identity they've had from previous seasons, but obviously that hasn't worked out too well. So don't ask me about my predictions for West Brom and Barnsley. It hasn't gone too well, those.
No, fair enough. But yeah, I think I had Fulham and Sheffield United to go up in those two spaces. I had us, I think, fourth or fifth. I can't remember exactly where I stuck us, but certainly wasn't as high as a lot of Albion fans are expecting. I certainly didn't think. I'm quite amazed that we're in second place because, as you said, I as an Albion fan myself, having seen these players play over the past year, I had real doubts about them going into Ismail's system, but it just proves, I think, what a good manager he is, really. But and Gab, which team do you think did sort of the best transfer business going into the season? Because there's been a lot of nice little bits of business going around the Championship. Obviously, not a lot of money spent. Obviously, that can be mainly due to the pandemic and stuff like that. Who do you think did the best business out of the Championship teams?
I think you've got to give a lot of credit to Stoke, Louis. I think their operations have kind of come under criticism quite a bit in recent years, but there's a feeling with they've appointed this man called Alex Aldridge to the board, and since he's come in, their business has started to be slightly more sensible, picking up Mario Vrancic, who I think he's won the Championship title twice with Norwich and played a reasonable role in both seasons. So that's I think that's a really good pickup. And they sold Nathan Collins for £12 million and picked up Ben Wilmot, who you could argue is not too far away in terms of ability level, for £2 million and or 2.5. So I think that Stoke City did some really good business, and they deserve to be where they are.
Yeah, a player that I think he did come on at the end, but Leo Ostergaard, who's on loan for Brighton. Brighton have just got an anvil of really good Championship and above centre backs. Obviously, Matt Clark being one of them. I think he's a player that at Coventry, when I watched them, really impressed me. So yeah, Stoke definitely did some really good business, but I think Stoke's still a bit of a raw subject among Albion fans at the moment, to be honest, Gab. But yeah, they did some fantastic business. But yeah,
do you think you have a rivalry with Stoke?
I'd say a little bit. They've always been our bogey team, to be fair. Obviously in the Midlands with us, but not, obviously it's still about an hour and a half drive from the Hawthorns. But I think we've always had a bit of a thing with them. Their fans have always been, our fans have always clashed with theirs, and we've always seen them as a bit of a bogey team. We never used to beat them in the Premier League, especially when they were under Tony Pulis. We always seemed to get beaten by a Rory Delap long throw. So it's a bit like that. Yeah, they've been a bit of a bogey team. Obviously lost to them last time we were in the Championship, 1-0 at the Hawthorns. But yeah, I think Stoke, I wouldn't say massive rivalry, but there's certainly a little bit of a, we want to beat Stoke because they always beat us sort of mentality among Albion fans in that respect, I think, Gab.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
As long as you hate Villa more, that's fine.
Yeah, I think Villa, yeah, definitely a perch above Stoke. But yeah, Gav, which Championship team have you been most impressed by this season? Obviously, lots of really good performances. Who would you say has been the team that you've been impressed by the most?
Louis, I've been massively impressed by Coventry City.
Oh yes.
I had them 19th before the start of the season. I was a little bit worried about them actually defensively, and lots of Coventry fans before the season, to their credit, said Victor Gyökeres is going to have a really good season. We're really excited about him, and I. I kind of got it because he had finished the previous season in quite good form in the last sort of month or so, and maybe got a couple of goals when they beat Millwall 6-1. But I felt like there was an element of recency bias because for 3/4 of that season, if you'd included his time at Swansea, Gyökeres didn't do an awful lot. But this year he looks fit, he looks strong, he looks confident in front of goal. And yeah, the recruitment has been brilliant. Simon Moore, for example, has been an inspired acquisition. In goal, you've got players like Sheaf stepping up. Callum O'Hare, I mean, if he can add goals to his game, what a player he'll be. Coventry really impressed me, and I don't know whether they're going to be a genuine promotion prospect. I feel it's too early to say, but this is, if nothing else, a massive step towards 50 points and another season of progression for the Sky Blues. So you've got to credit them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, from what I've seen from Coventry, it's not that they're just picking up results. They're actually playing well and they're really beating sides. Obviously, you saw against Fulham last week, they didn't just play well and nick a 1-0 against them. They really battered them and they really put them to the sword. And I think that's that clinical nature, especially of Victor Gyökeres up front, is one of those things that you just really need in Championship level. Obviously, we've struggled to have a bit of clinical finishing in our side over recent weeks, but yeah, just to have that in your side and to have that ability to put sides to the sword so easily is so crucial at Championship level, and it can make or break your season ambitions if you get it right.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got to credit. And Mark Robbins has just done an absolutely remarkable job. I went to some of Coventry's games when they were in League One, and it looked like an absolutely horrible sort of position for them. And yeah, I think I was there when they went down, and then Mark Robbins took charge at the back end of that season, and he actually was in charge when they won the Johnson Plate Trophy, as it was then.
Yeah.
And since then, they've won 2 promotions in 3 years. They've stayed in the Championship quite comfortably in the end, and now they're right at the top. You couldn't have dreamt that. And the fact that they've still got this hasn't happened with. Okay,
Yeah.
you'd think that would have happened with a change of ownership. You'd think if I'd said to a Coventry fan in 2017 that they would be in 4 years' time fourth, third in the Championship, they would have said, well, Zizi must have gone and we must have got a brilliant owner in who spent lots of money. That's not happened. So the fact that Mark Robbins has just transformed Coventry City without that change of ownership, I think it's just an absolutely extraordinary achievement. And I don't think he gets enough credit for it, to be honest.
Yeah, that is a fantastic story, Coventry. Obviously, just the road from Albion and yourself, Gab, with Birmingham, and they're doing a really astounding job. And it'd be certainly nice to see them keep pushing into these playoffs, because obviously having Midlands clubs in the Premier League is always something, as a Midlands football fan, I personally love to see. But Gab, which team do you think is sort of has disappointed you a little bit? A team that you thought, I think you're going to do really well this season, and so far they just have kind of lacked it a little bit.
I would say Derby and Barnsley because Derby County had bottom of the league. Barnsley because I felt like they would really grow because although they'd lost Alex Mount to yourselves and Daryl DK and possibly one other player, but certainly it wasn't more than three key players that they'd lost. They had a young squad that I thought would continue to develop. They got a manager in Markus Schopp who had done some brilliant things in Austria with PSV Hartberg, and I felt like if they could continue that high pressing style of play whilst maybe using the ball a bit more methodically, I thought that they could be in for a really big season. So I got that completely wrong, and Markus Schopp hasn't turned out really to be the manager that maybe I'd hoped him to be, and certainly Barnsley fans had hoped him to be. So yeah, they've been pretty disappointing so far. I think you'd have probably hoped for a bit more from Nottingham Forest. I thought they would have been higher before they obviously chose to change manager as well.
Yeah, there's a few teams in the Championship. I think Barnsley is one of them, because I think they just really set the standards last season with a great season and getting into those playoffs. What a fairy tale story that was for them. Obviously, just surviving relegation the season before, and Shot came in, and it was another sort of bit of an unknown quantity among English football fans. But you thought so was Valérien Ismaël when he came in. So they thought, this is going to be more of the same. And unfortunately for them, it hasn't quite clicked. I think maybe us taking their captain away hasn't really helped them in that respect. But no, hopefully see them picking up a little bit of form later on in the season. But Gab, who do you, if obviously we'll talk a little bit about the who you think's going to go up now, but who do you think's going to go down in the Championship this season? If you had to think about it now.
This is a big question, Louis. I think Wayne Rooney is doing a brilliant job at Derby. I love the way he's handled the whole situation and the farce with Mel Morris's regime. I think Peterborough are a team that I'm especially worried about, even though they beat my own team 3-0. I do think Barnsley have got enough good players to get out of it. I'd probably be more worried about Hull City because of question marks over the ownership regime, and I don't think a lot of fans have a lot of patience with Grant McCann. So yeah, I think that you're probably looking at Derby, Peterborough, and Hull.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I think I'd probably have to agree. To be honest, I think that's. I think Barnsley, although I think they might be around there if they keep playing the way they are, I think they'll just get out of it because I think they've got a bit more quality in their side than perhaps those three. But Derby, I think, is one that I'm willing them to stay up because I want everything on the pitch. I want everything on the pitch to be different to what's going on off it. I want them to be able to stay up, and I want Wayne Rooney, who I've never been a massive fan of as a player. He's always ended up scoring against Albion, but I think he's a player he's a manager that I think has acted with real class through a situation where it's quite easy to pick up the phone and have a real go at the owners and have a real rant in the interviews and stuff. And I think he's acted with real class, and as what it's clear that his intentions are that he wants the best for Derby County, and he's not a manager who's using Derby County as a springboard to get another job. He's a manager that wants to improve the club, and he wants to make things better for the fans of Derby County. And I think that's really nice to see from a player who essentially already or a manager and a former player who essentially has the world and has all the money that he wants and could go and just leave them in the mess and could just go, right, sorry, I'm not doing this anymore. And in fact, he's chosen to stay, and he's acting with real class, and he's really trying to dig them out of the situation that they're in, which I think is nice. I don't know what you think about that, Gab.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I sort of compare it slightly to Paul Scholes, who had a stint in management at Oldham, and I think that he actually left. And obviously, you can say with lots of major issues with Abdul Lemtigam's ownership regime at Oldham, but it felt, as well as that, to me, there was an element of Paul Scholes thinking, I'm not ready for this. It used to be very cosy for me at Manchester United, and I was sort of, it was a sort of more luxurious kind of experience, whereas, at Oldham, that, there's a draft in the training ground, the kettle's doesn't always work, and all this sort of thing, and he left sort of 8 games in. And I think that's a real testament of Wayne Rooney's character, that he's going to go through this situation and he wants to fight for the club, to fight for the fans, and to persist. And every credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely great to see from a manager who's come from I'd say, privileged playing career and coming into a club that's really struggling and wanting to persist. That's really nice to see. But Gav, finally, if we ask you about your teams to be promoted, who do you think, from what you've seen so far in the Championship, will make those three to make it into the promised land, if we like, of the Premier League?
I think Fulham will win the league. I'm expecting a really strong second half of the season from them, so it wouldn't surprise me if they put a really strong winning run together. I would probably go with Bournemouth the second spot, but what I'm really interested in is the playoff picture. I would probably imagine that West Brom will finish third or fourth, but then there's lots of teams that have got quite sort of humble resources, haven't necessarily spent their way up here, that could do well. Obviously, Stoke, they've been able to bring in the likes of Romain Sawyers, who you'll know all about, and
Yeah.
Brankic. So they're a slightly different case, but Coventry are massively achieving against the odds. QPR, they've been able to sign players like Charlie Austin, I suppose, and Stefan Johansson, and two other former West Brom players. But you look at the pack just outside the current playoffs. It's Huddersfield, Blackburn, Bristol City, and Reading, all clubs that are sort of on the fringes. Millwall as well, and Blackpool even. Although you wouldn't put them in the playoff sort of scramble necessarily, but lots of clubs in high position without necessarily having enormous budgets. So I think that's a credit to the unpredictability of the Championship and why we love this division.
Yeah, I think I'd go for. I think Fulham. I'm a bit about them. I think I might go for Bournemouth first, and I think from what I've seen from Albion, I certainly didn't say this at the start of the season. I might go for us in second, and obviously, as you said, the playoffs. I think it would be we'd be playing a fool's game to try and predict the playoffs. Really, with them from what we've seen over previous years with playoffs, but. Yeah, it'd be very.
I'll tell you what, Louis. I'll say West Brom will win the playoffs. Just so
good
so if
choice.
I go to a West Brom game in future, I won't need to take my bodyguards with me.
Yeah, good choice, Gav. Good choice. I rate that from you. But Gav, a massive thank you for joining me on the Baggies podcast today. It's been great to chat to you about West Brom and the Championship as a whole. Been great to draw on your wealth of Championship knowledge. So thank you very much for joining me.
That's my pleasure, Louis. I know you do some great stuff with the podcast, so really glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, pleasure to have you on. But thank you very much, listeners, for listening to the Baggies podcast this week. We'll be back again very soon with another episode, hopefully after the Birmingham game. But be sure to subscribe to the podcast and make sure that you're leaving us a nice review if you've enjoyed. And a big thank you to Gab for joining me on the podcast. You'll be sure to follow him on Twitter with the link in the description of the pod. But thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.